There are days when your strength looks fine on the outside, but your soul is exhausted on the inside. You're tired of being strong, tired of explaining yourself, tired of carrying responsibilities no one sees. And I need you to hear this clearly today. Allah knows you are tired. He sees the weight you've been carrying quietly, the prayers you didn't have words for, and the tears you swallowed because you had to keep going. Your exhaustion is not invisible to him, even when it feels unnoticed by everyone else. You are not weak because you're tired. You are human. You didn't lose faith because you're worn down. You've just been pouring out for too long without resting in God's presence. Allah is not disappointed in your weariness. He is compassionate toward it. He knows the battles you fought in silence, the nights you stayed awake worrying, and the days you showed up even when you had nothing left. This moment of tiredness is not the end. It's an invitation to stop striving and start leaning. If this word is speaking to your heart, like this video as a sign that you're choosing rest over resistance. Subscribe if you're ready to let God carry what you've been holding alone. And comment where you're watching from, because this message is for every tired soul who needs to be reminded that God sees you, God knows you, and God is ready to restore you. There's a kind of exhaustion that doesn't show up on your calendar or in your conversations. It lives beneath your smile, behind your discipline, inside the part of you that keeps showing up even when you feel empty. You've learned how to manage it, how to function through it, how to look capable while your soul feels worn thin. And while people may only see your strength, God sees your exhaustion. He sees the parts you've hidden so well that even you forget how heavy they are. God sees the tiredness you don't talk about because you don't want to seem ungrateful. He sees the weariness you push down because others depend on you. He sees the fatigue that comes from being the strong one, the dependable one, the one who keeps it together when everything inside feels like it's unraveling. You are not dramatic for feeling this way. You are not failing. You are human. And God is attentive to every part of you. There are nights when your body rests, but your mind doesn't. You lie still, but your thoughts keep running, replaying conversations, decisions, worries, responsibilities. God sees that too. He sees the mental exhaustion that comes from carrying more than you were ever meant to carry alone. The kind of tiredness that no nap can fix. The kind that needs peace, not just sleep. God sees the emotional labor you've been doing quietly, the way you absorb tension in rooms, the way you hold space for other people's pain while setting your own aside, the way you show up for everyone else, even when no one asks how you're really doing. That kind of tiredness is invisible to most people, but it is never invisible to God. He sees the faith you've been exercising just to keep going. Faith that doesn't look like shouting or celebrating, but like getting out of bed again. Faith that doesn't feel victorious, but persistent. Faith that keeps trusting even when you don't feel strong. God honors that kind of faith deeply. Your exhaustion does not cancel your faith. It proves how much you've been relying on Him without even realizing it. There are moments when you feel guilty for being tired because you know God has been good. You remind yourself of blessings, of answered prayers, of doors that opened. But gratitude and exhaustion can coexist. Being thankful doesn't mean you're not tired. Loving God doesn't mean you don't get weary. God is not offended by your honesty. He already knows. God sees the weight of responsibility you carry. Some of it was given to you. Some of it you picked up because you felt like you had no choice. Some of it you carry because you care deeply. But caring deeply without resting deeply will always lead to exhaustion. God sees where your heart has been stretched beyond healthy limits. He sees the silent sacrifices, the dreams you postponed, the needs you ignored, the boundaries you didn't set because you didn't want to disappoint anyone. Over time, those sacrifices add up. They settle in your body, your emotions, your spirit. God sees that accumulation, and he is not indifferent to it. God also sees the pressure you put on yourself, the expectation to be better, stronger, more faithful, more disciplined. You push yourself because you believe you should be able to handle it. But God never asked you to carry everything alone. He sees the self-imposed burdens and gently invites you to release them. There is a specific tenderness in the way God looks at the weary. Not judgment, not disappointment, compassion. He does not ask you why you're tired. He does not tell you to try harder. He does not minimize what you're feeling. He draws near with understanding. God sees the exhaustion that comes from waiting for clarity, waiting for change, waiting for relief, waiting for prayers to be answered. Waiting can drain you in ways action never does. Hope deferred weighs heavy. God sees the patience you've been exercising and the toll it has taken on you. He sees the weariness that comes from fighting battles no one knows about, internal battles, emotional battles, spiritual battles, battles with doubt, fear, insecurity, or grief. Just because they are unseen doesn't mean they aren't real. God sees every quiet fight. God sees the moments when you wanted to stop but didn't, when quitting felt easier than continuing, but something inside you kept moving forward. That persistence cost you something. God sees the cost. He also sees the parts of you that are still trying to hold everything together out of habit. You've been strong for so long that you don't know how to stop. You don't know how to ask for help. You don't know how to rest without feeling guilty. God sees that pattern, and he wants to interrupt it gently. Exhaustion often makes you question yourself. You wonder if you're doing something wrong, if your faith is weak, if you're missing something spiritually. But tiredness is not a spiritual failure. It's a signal that you've been giving more than you've been receiving. God sees that imbalance. God sees how exhaustion affects your emotions, how small things feel heavy, how patience feels thin, how joy feels distant. He does not shame you for this. He understands the connection between your soul and your strength. He sees the moments when you pray but don't have words, when all you can offer is silence or a sigh or tears. Those prayers still reach him. Exhaustion does not block communication with God. Sometimes it deepens it. God sees you when you feel unseen by others, when your effort goes unnoticed, when your faithfulness feels unappreciated, when your presence feels expected but not celebrated. God sees you fully, not just what you produce, but who you are. He sees the tiredness that comes from carrying hope when it feels fragile, from believing again after disappointment, from trusting again after hurt. That kind of courage is exhausting, and God honors it. God sees the part of you that's afraid to rest because you're scared things will fall apart if you stop. You've been holding everything together for so long that rest feels risky. God sees that fear, and he wants to show you that he can hold what you release. There is no version of your exhaustion that God overlooks. Not physical, not emotional, not spiritual. He sees it all without you having to explain it perfectly. You don't need the right words. He already understands. God sees your tiredness not as a flaw, but as a moment of need. And need does not repel God. It draws him closer. He is near to the weary, attentive to the worn down, gentle with the exhausted. You don't have to earn rest. You don't have to justify your fatigue. You don't have to prove how much you've done. God sees you, and seeing you, he invites you into restoration, not by demanding more from you, but by offering himself to carry what you no longer can. There is a quiet lie many faithful people carry in their hearts, and it sounds like this: if I were stronger spiritually, I wouldn't feel this tired. Somewhere along the way, tiredness became associated with weakness, and weariness became confused with a lack of faith. But tiredness does not mean you don't believe. It means you have been believing while carrying more than you were meant to carry alone. Faith does not cancel exhaustion. In many cases, faith is the very reason you kept going long after you were tired. You can love God deeply and still feel worn down. You can pray sincerely and still feel depleted. You can trust God fully and still feel overwhelmed. None of these realities cancel each other out. They coexist. Tiredness is not the absence of faith. It is often the evidence of endurance. You kept trusting when it would have been easier to quit. You kept showing up when rest felt overdue. You kept believing even when strength felt thin. Many people of faith feel guilty for being tired. They tell themselves that others have it worse. They remind themselves of blessings. They push through exhaustion because they believe rest is a luxury they haven't earned. But God never asked you to prove your faith through depletion. He never required you to run on empty to be considered faithful. That expectation did not come from Him. Tiredness often comes from carrying responsibilities that were never meant to rest solely on your shoulders. You carried family expectations. You carried emotional weight for others. You carried unanswered prayers. You carried uncertainty about the future. You carried roles that demanded more than they gave back. None of that means your faith was weak. It means your capacity was stretched. Faith is not measured by how much you can endure without rest. Faith is measured by how willing you are to trust God enough to lay burdens down. Sometimes the most faithful act is not pushing harder, but pausing honestly. Rest is not a lack of belief, it is an act of trust. It says, I believe God can handle what I release. There is a difference between spiritual laziness and holy fatigue. Spiritual laziness avoids responsibility. Holy fatigue comes from obedience. You didn't get tired because you avoided God's call. You got tired because you answered it. You kept serving. You kept loving. You kept giving. That kind of tiredness deserves compassion, not correction. God never shames His children for being weary. He does not accuse you of lacking faith when you are exhausted. He understands that the human body, mind, and spirit are connected. When one is strained, the others feel it. God designed you with limits on purpose, not as a flaw, but as a boundary that invites dependence on Him. You may have learned to associate faith with constant movement, always doing, always serving, always producing, but God also works in stillness. He restores in quiet. He speaks in rest. Faith that never rests eventually becomes strained, not strong. Tiredness does not mean you failed to pray enough. It does not mean you didn't believe hard enough. It does not mean you missed God's will. Sometimes it means you stayed faithful longer than your strength could comfortably sustain. God sees that. He honors that. There are seasons when faith requires action and seasons when faith requires surrender. Surrender is not giving up, it is giving over. It is trusting God with outcomes instead of trying to manage everything yourself. Tiredness often signals that it is time to shift from striving to leaning. Paul does not equate your value with your productivity. He does not love you more when you are strong or less when you are tired. His love remains constant. Your exhaustion does not disappoint him. It moves him with compassion. Many faithful people struggle because they believe rest is selfish. They worry that if they slow down, everything will fall apart. But God does not need you to exhaust yourself to keep things together. He invites you to rest so you can remember who is actually sustaining everything. I said this last week, more for my own self out of curiosity. Tiredness also comes from emotional labor that goes unseen, being patient when you want to react, being kind when you feel hurt, being forgiving when you feel misunderstood, being hopeful when you feel disappointed. That emotional discipline requires energy. God sees the cost of that faithfulness. You may feel like you should be stronger by now, like you should have more energy, like faith should have fixed this already. But faith is not a shield from fatigue. It is a companion through it. God walks with you through tiredness, not around it. There are times when God allows you to feel tired so you will finally stop pretending you are unlimited. So you will stop depending solely on yourself. So you will learn to rest without guilt. This tiredness is not punishment, it is invitation. Invitation to slow down. Invitation to release, invitation to receive instead of give, invitation to let God carry what you've been holding alone. Faith grows deeper when you allow yourself to be held. You don't have to earn rest by reaching a breaking point. You don't have to collapse to be allowed to pause. God welcomes you into rest now in your tiredness without conditions. Tiredness does not make you less spiritual. It makes you honest about your limits, honest about your needs, honest about your humanity. God responds to honesty with grace. There is a gentleness in God's presence toward the weary. He does not rush you. He does not pressure you. He restores you at a pace that heals instead of harms. Faith matures when it learns to rest. When you are tired, it is not a sign to quit believing. It is a sign to change how you are carrying your belief. You were never meant to carry faith alone. You were meant to carry it with God. God knows the difference between rebellion and fatigue, between resistance and weariness, between disobedience and exhaustion. He does not confuse your tiredness with failure. Your faith is not fragile because you are tired. It has been resilient. It has lasted through things that drained you. That endurance matters. Tiredness does not cancel calling. It does not delay purpose. It does not disqualify you. It simply signals the need for renewal. God invites the weary not to explain themselves, but to come close, to rest, to breathe, to be restored. Faith that rests is not weak, it is wise. Tiredness does not mean you have been carrying faith wrong. It means you have been carrying a lot, and God is ready to help you carry it differently. There is a gentle invitation hidden inside weariness, one that often goes unnoticed because tired people are taught to push instead of pause. When God invites the weary to rest, He is not questioning their strength, He is protecting their soul. Rest is not a reward for finishing everything perfectly. It is a response to being human. God never designed you to prove your worth through exhaustion. He designed you to live in rhythm with Him. So many people believe rest must be earned. They tell themselves, once this season ends, once this problem resolves, once I finish this responsibility, then I will rest. But that finish line keeps moving. God does not place rest at the end of your endurance. He places it in the middle of your obedience. Rest is not a pause from faith. It is an expression of faith. It says, I trust God enough to stop striving. When God invites you to rest, He is not dismissing your responsibilities. He is reminding you that He is not asking you to carry them alone. Striving happens when you believe everything depends on you. Rest happens when you remember everything depends on God. One posture leads to burnout, the other leads to peace. Many weary souls resist rest because they associate it with laziness. They were taught that stopping means falling behind, that slowing down means losing momentum, that resting means giving up. But God does not see rest as retreat. He sees it as renewal. Rest restores clarity, strength, and perspective. Without it, even good work becomes heavy. God invites the weary to rest because he knows exhaustion distorts vision. When you are tired, small problems feel overwhelming. Decisions feel harder. Joy feels distant. Rest is not about avoiding responsibility. It is about restoring the capacity to handle it with wisdom and grace. There is also a spiritual humility in rest. Rest admits that you are not limitless, that you need God's strength more than your own, that you were never meant to function as your own source. This humility does not diminish you, it aligns you. God meets humility with grace. Rest is deeply relational. When God calls you to rest, he is calling you closer, not farther away. Rest creates space to notice his presence, to listen without rushing, to sit without agenda. Many people pray while tired, but never rest with God. Rest allows relationship to deepen beyond requests. The weary often fear rest because silence brings emotions to the surface. When you stop moving, you start feeling. God invites you to rest, not to overwhelm you, but to heal you. Feelings that surface are not signs of failure. They are signals of areas that need care. God invites the weary to rest because rest reveals what striving hides. In stillness, you recognize what you've been carrying unnecessarily. You notice where fear has been driving effort. You realize how much pressure you placed on yourself that God never asked for. Rest also teaches boundaries. It helps you recognize when to say no, when to pause, when to release. Boundaries are not barriers to love, they are protectors of health. God does not ask you to give endlessly without replenishment. Many people believe rest means stopping all activity, but rest is deeper than inactivity. It is an internal posture. You can be busy and rested. You can be still and anxious. God's rest begins in the soul. It is the quiet assurance that you are held, even when things are unfinished. God invites the weary to rest because he knows rest restores trust. When you rest, you practice letting go of control, letting go of outcomes, letting go of constant vigilance. This release strengthens faith. Rest also recalibrates priorities. When you are rested, you can distinguish between what is urgent and what is important. Exhaustion blurs that line. Everything feels equally demanding. Rest restores discernment. There is a tenderness in God's invitation to rest. He does not command it harshly. He offers it gently. He knows how defensive weary people can become, how they justify exhaustion, how they fear being judged. God meets weariness with compassion, not correction. Rest is not withdrawal from purpose, it is preparation for it. God restores before he releases, he renews before he redirects. Many people miss this rhythm and burn out, trying to sustain purpose without rest. God invites the weary to rest because rest heals the nervous system. Anxiety calms, breathing deepens, presence returns. You begin to feel safe again. Safety is necessary for healing. Rest also allows gratitude to resurface. When you are exhausted, you overlook small mercies. When rested, you notice them. Gratitude strengthens joy. The weary often confuse rest with quitting, but quitting abandons calling. Rest preserves it. God does not want you to abandon what he gave you. He wants you to approach it with renewed strength. Rest also restores creativity. When striving stops, ideas flow again. Inspiration returns. God often speaks new direction in moments of rest. God invites the weary to rest because rest reminds you that you are loved for who you are, not for what you do. Performance-based identity collapses in rest. True identity emerges. Rest teaches you to receive. Many faithful people know how to give but struggle to receive. Receiving care, grace, help, rest opens your hands. God invites the weary to rest because he knows prolonged exhaustion can harden the heart. Fatigue makes you irritable, impatient, numb. Rest softens what strain hardens. Rest also prepares you for future challenges. Strength restored today will be needed tomorrow. God is not wasting time when he calls you to rest. He is investing in your longevity. You may feel pressure to explain your need for rest to others, but God does not require justification. Your weariness is reason enough. You do not need permission from people to obey God's invitation. Let this. Rest is not a sign that you are falling behind. It is a sign that you are aligning with God's design. Creation itself was designed with rest woven into it. God models what he values. God invites the weary to rest because rest restores joy. Joy drained by exhaustion returns quietly. You laugh again. You feel lighter. You remember yourself. Rest also restores compassion. When you are rested, you have more patience for others. You listen better. You respond gently. Exhaustion shortens empathy. God invites the weary to rest because he knows that striving can become a form of control. Rest is surrender. Surrender is freedom. Rest teaches you that the world keeps turning even when you stop. This realization is humbling and relieving. You are important, but you are not the source. Rest also heals spiritual dryness. When prayer feels forced, rest allows connection to flow naturally again. God does not invite you to rest so you can escape life. He invites you to rest so you can re-enter life with strength and clarity. You may feel uncomfortable resting at first. Guilt may rise. Thoughts may race. God is patient. Rest is learned. It takes time to trust it. God invites the weary to rest because rest is where restoration begins. Restoration of strength, restoration of hope, restoration of peace. Rest is not the end of your journey. It is the support your journey requires. God sees your weariness and responds not with demands, but with invitation. Come close, breathe, release. This is how God carries the weary. There are battles you fight that never make it into conversation. No one knows how much effort it takes just to stay steady, to stay kind, to stay hopeful. You wake up, show up, do what needs to be done, and no one sees the resistance you push through internally. Silent battles are some of the heaviest because they are carried alone. But just because they are silent to people does not mean they are silent to God. Every internal struggle, every quiet tear, every moment you chose restraint over reaction matters deeply to him. Silent battles often involve your thoughts, the war in your mind that questions your worth, your direction, your decisions. You fight doubt while trying to believe. You fight fear while trying to trust. You fight discouragement while still saying the right words out loud. This mental exhaustion is real. God sees the energy it takes to guard your thoughts, to redirect them toward hope when they want to spiral toward despair. That effort is not unnoticed. Some silent battles are emotional. You carry disappointment you never processed, grief you never had time to mourn, loneliness you never admitted because you didn't want to sound ungrateful. You learned how to function while hurting. God sees the emotional discipline it takes to keep going without collapsing. Emotional strength does not mean the absence of pain. It means choosing not to let pain define your behavior. God honors that choice. There are silent battles of restraint, moments when you wanted to defend yourself but stayed quiet, when you wanted to explain but chose peace, when you wanted to react but chose wisdom. Those moments cost you something. Silence is not free. It requires self-control, maturity, and trust. God sees every time you restrained yourself, even when you were justified. That restraint matters. Some battles are spiritual. You keep praying even when answers delay. You keep believing even when circumstances contradict faith. You keep showing up even when God feels quiet. That persistence is a battle. Faith in silence is one of the hardest forms of faith because it has no immediate reward. God sees that endurance. You fight battles no one applauds. You resist temptation privately. You choose integrity when shortcuts are available. You forgive internally even when the relationship never gets repaired. These victories are invisible to people, but they are loud in the spirit. God values what is done in secret. Silent battles also include the effort to stay healthy, managing anxiety without letting it control you, carrying sadness without letting it harden you, regulating emotions so they don't spill out onto others. This internal management is exhausting. God knows how much strength it takes to remain gentle when you are overwhelmed. There are battles of identity. You fight against old labels that resurface when you are tired. You fight the urge to define yourself by past mistakes. You fight comparison when you see others moving faster or easier. These internal corrections take energy. God sees the work you are doing to think truth instead of lies. Sometimes your silent battle is simply staying in hope, staying in faith, staying present, staying alive in a season that feels heavy. You don't talk about how hard it is because you don't want to worry anyone, but God knows. He sees the courage it takes to stay. Silent battles often feel unfair because there is no recognition. No one thanks you for choosing patience. No one notices when you overcome fear. No one celebrates when you don't give up. But God is not blind to unseen effort. He is attentive to what happens in hidden places. You may feel like these battles don't count because they didn't change anything externally. But internal victories shape character. They build resilience. They prepare you for future seasons. God values who you are becoming more than what is immediately visible. Silent battles also shape empathy. When you fought quietly, you become gentle with others. You don't assume their silence means ease. You recognize hidden struggles. God uses your experience to shape compassion. There are moments when you feel exhausted because you've been fighting internally for so long. You wonder if it would be easier to just let go. God sees that fatigue. He does not shame it. He understands that unseen battles wear you down. You may question whether these struggles are meaningful if no one knows about them. But God does not measure impact by visibility. He measures faithfulness by obedience. And many of your silent battles were acts of obedience. God sees the prayers you never spoke out loud, the sighs that carried more than words, the moments you whispered help in your heart because you didn't know how to articulate the need. Those prayers reached him. Some silent battles are about forgiveness. You release resentment internally even when the other person never apologizes. That is not weakness, that is strength. God sees the freedom you choose even when justice feels unresolved. There are battles of self-discipline. You get up when you want to stay down. You show kindness when you want to withdraw. You maintain routines when motivation is gone. Discipline without applause is heavy. God sees the effort. Silent battles also involve resisting despair. You choose not to give up, even when hope feels fragile. You hold on to small reasons to keep going. That holding on matters to God. You may feel like these battles have changed you in ways others don't understand. You are quieter, more cautious, more reflective. That is not loss. It is depth. God is shaping something steady in you. God sees the nights when you cry silently so no one hears. He sees the mornings when you gather yourself and face the day anyway. That courage is not small. Silent battles are often misunderstood by people. They assume you're fine because you're functioning. God knows functioning is not the same as flourishing. He sees beneath behavior. You are not weak for having internal battles. You are strong for continuing despite them. God does not compare your struggle to anyone else's. He meets you where you are. There is no such thing as a meaningless battle when God is watching. Every moment you choose faith over fear, restraint over reaction, hope over despair is recorded in your becoming. God sees your silent battles, and he responds not with indifference, but with compassion. He draws near to the internally weary. He strengthens the quietly faithful. You don't have to fight alone forever. God sees the battles you never talk about, and he is present in them. Your silent battles matter deeply to God. There comes a moment when striving no longer feels productive, when pushing harder only makes you feel emptier, when effort stops bringing peace. That moment is not failure, it is revelation. Divine restoration does not begin when you prove how strong you are. It begins when you stop trying to be strong on your own. Striving is exhausting because it places the weight of outcomes on your shoulders. Leaning is restful because it returns that weight to God. Striving often comes from fear that if you stop, everything will fall apart. Fear that if you rest, you will be left behind. Fear that if you release control, you will lose something important. God understands that fear. He knows why you learned to push. He knows the seasons that required you to be resilient, alert, and self-sufficient. But what once protected you may now be exhausting you. Divine restoration begins when you trust God enough to release what you have been gripping too tightly. Leaning on God is not passive, it is intentional surrender. It is choosing trust over control. It is acknowledging that your strength has limits and God's does not. This shift does not happen all at once. It happens in small decisions. Choosing to pause instead of push, choosing to pray instead of panic, choosing to rest instead of overextend. Many people confuse leaning with weakness because they were taught that independence equals strength. But in God's economy, dependence is strength. Leaning on God aligns you with his design. You were never meant to carry life alone. You were created for relationship, not self-sufficiency. Striving keeps you busy but disconnected. You do all the right things but feel distant from peace. Leaning reconnects you to presence. You begin to feel supported instead of pressured, guided instead of driven, held instead of hustling. Divine restoration begins when you stop measuring your worth by how much you can endure. You release the belief that rest must be earned through exhaustion. You accept that rest is given through grace. God does not require you to collapse before you can lean. He invites you now. Leaning requires humility. You admit that you do not have all the answers, that you cannot fix everything, that you need help. This humility is not shameful, it is freeing. God responds to humility with grace, not judgment. When you stop striving, your nervous system begins to settle. Breathing deepens, thoughts slow, clarity returns. Restoration touches your body, not just your spirit. God cares about your whole being. Leaning also changes how you make decisions. Instead of reacting, you respond. Instead of rushing, you wait. Instead of forcing, you trust timing. This shift protects you from burnout and regret. Striving often leads to resentment. You feel unappreciated, overextended, invisible. Leaning restores joy. You serve from overflow instead of obligation.